Hey, welcome, folks. It is another episode of Quizzing in America. My name is Jeremy. I am your host. And today I have with me Mr. David Jacobson from a company known as Trivworks. Now, they're not your traditional bar trivia company, they do mostly corporate and private events. If you remember, I had Noah Tarno from the Big Quiz Thing on a few episodes ago. I have a feeling David's company might be in a similar vein, but this is a company that I'm not as familiar with as some of the others that I've had on here. So I'm looking forward to talking to David, getting to know him, getting to know about Trivworks, and finding out about how they do trivia and then playing a little game. So welcome, David. Thank you for being here. And tell me, I guess, a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about Trivworks, if you want, the origins of Trivworks.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to be here. So I have a company called Trivworks. And as you mentioned, I don't do traditional pub quiz. I started as a pub quiz host as a side business in New York City almost 20 years ago. About 2006 is when I first started hosting pub quiz, but then I was able to create my company Trivworks, which, as you mentioned, specializes in corporate event entertainment and group bonding. So I'm actually not a bar trivia vendor or pub quiz company. I really do specialize in corporate and private events.
So now you started, though, you said, as a side business doing bar trivia. And is that what led you to go? Because, I've been doing bar trivia for almost 20 years. And
Mm.
yes, the corporate side of the business is a much more lucrative. Like, is that what made you go, why am I wasting my time in bars when I could be doing these corporate events and doing them bigger and better and also making more money, right? I mean,
Well, let me take a step back and say that I'm probably a little different than folks that you interview on this show or who you meet in the bar quiz world because I'm not a trivia guy. I'm not someone
okay.
who's always loved trivia. I'm not particularly good at trivia. I've never been on Jeopardy. I never watched Jeopardy. I'm a little bit different. I kind of fell into this. So about 20 years ago already, 2006, I was living in New York City, working at a large nonprofit organization and not really making any money, but I did have somewhat of a flexible schedule. And I was living on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and a big Irish bar opened up right near about a block from where I live. And I went there once, and there was a guy hosting a pub quiz. I'd never heard of pub quiz before. And around that time, mid 2000s, 2006 or so, bar trivia pub quiz really was not a thing here in New York or in the States. Apparently, is a thing overseas and in England and Ireland and such, but in the States, it really hadn't caught on. I'd never experienced it before, and there was. It was a big empty, big bar, but there was, a few people in there and one guy kind of behind the bar hosting this bar trivia. And it was fun and it was silly and he was asking trivia questions. It was a bar tab and it was a good time. And I brought a couple of my friends the following week. And it turns out that this is just a regular patron at this, newish Irish bar. And they had him just hosting for, in exchange for a bar tab. They would, let him have some free drinks in exchange for hosting the trivia event. And we would go several times, over that summer. And apparently, this guy who was working behind the bar hosting the trivia, he would indulge a little bit too much and kind of just help himself too much. And one night he got into a fight at trivia night, which you don't hear too much of, but he got into
Sure.
a trivia night fight, and they fired him, and they replaced him with this other patron, this woman who was totally different. She was very boring. She had no personality. She would read the questions, read the answers. She would take forever in between each question, forever in between each round, and it just killed the vibe. And my friends were with me. They said, David, you should do this. You would be much better at this. You could do a really good job at this. Now, I have no background in doing anything like this. I'm not an actor. I'm not a stand-up comedian, nothing like that. I just have a kind of a witty sense of humor, and that might be it. But I said, you know what? I think I probably could do this. I live around the corner. I got a flexible schedule. Why not? So I approached the Irish bartender, a guy named Paul, and I just gave him my name and number. And he said, "Well, we've got a quiz master now. I'll keep this in mind." A week or two later, my phone rings, and it's this Irish bartender, Paul. He's freaking out, saying, "We need a new quiz master. Our quiz master, she quit. We need you. Can you come tonight?" And I said, "Okay." And I showed up, and he gave me this quiz that he had written, and the microphone, showed me how to use it, and just said, "Go." And so I did it, and I just did my normal thing of, conversation with friends. I make them laugh, just my goofy sense of humor. I tried that on a microphone, and it worked. And I just brought whatever energy that I thought would fit the situation, and that I liked about the previous trivia host. Being witty and engaging the crowd and being snarky, but also things like moving at a quicker pace and keeping things moving, and keeping it lighthearted and fun. And it worked. And when I finished that first trivia gig with, 10 people in the bar, they clapped. And I'm like, wow, this really worked. And I came back the following week and there were more people there. And the following week, there were more people. And next thing I know, I've got a full house. And this is a big place, it fits about 100, 120 people. And it was just a lot of people every single week. And then it got picked up by Time Out New York. Back then, when there's print media, Time Out New York, every week it would print, the best things happening in all of New York City that week by day. And there it was, Tuesday, trivia night at the Gale Pub, hosted by, Quizmaster David Jacobson. That's the first time I ever saw my name with
That's
Quizmaster in front.
awesome. And I love that. And do you have any connection? Do you still, I mean, does that bartender Paul know what a different, because I mean, look at what he what a difference he's made in your life, right? Like it led you on this career.
Yeah, I mean, he and I are still Facebook friends, and every now and then I'll put something up, and he'll say, "I'm still waiting for my royalties," which is
Yeah,
pretty fun.
yeah. I mean, but it's amazing. I have kind of a very similar journey. Well, I don't,
Yeah,
you got this big national company. I don't quite have
yeah,
that, but there are so many people that along my journey made such an impact and like just
yeah.
doing a little thing. There's a guy, Brian Irving. He's the whole reason I started hosting the first quiz that I started hosting. And the guy that was hosting it before me, Pat Clancy, he helped me get another bar. And so there's
Yeah.
all these little people along the way that helped me kind of succeed and become bigger and better known at what I
Yep.
do. And then it's changed my life over the last 20 years and had such a huge impact. So then how many years did you host this pub quiz before you started doing, like, when was your first corporate event? And then when did you go, you know what? Let me brand this and come up with Trivworks and really focus on the corporate side of things.
Sure. So I was hosting just bar trivia every Tuesday night at this place for about 3 years. I actually got invited to host it at another bar on Monday nights in Manhattan. So I was suddenly hosting two bar trivia nights a week, just making extra cash. And that's all all I was really interested in doing. But then in 2008, the financial crisis hit, and I lived in New York City. I'm sure in Chicago, where you are, and everywhere else in the country, it was very very bad. But particularly New York, it was really really bad. People were being laid off left and right. Those who still had jobs were suddenly doing the work of two or three people for no additional
Sure.
compensation, and people were really in a bad place. And I realized at that moment that there was an opportunity here to create a company or some kind of service for businesses, for companies who could not thank or reward their employees and say, you know what, we appreciate you, we value what you're doing, we can't give you any additional money right now, but we want to do something to show you how much we appreciate you. Now, I've been doing bar trivia for 3 years. I saw the reaction I would get. I don't know what kind of experience that you've seen or your host events your host, but in my events is focus on really raucous energy, like a lot of screaming, a lot of cheering, really kind of like a concert vibe almost. And I said, I could really do this for companies. Imagine if there was, you know, customized trivia questions and tailored for them, how much fun that would be to capture that kind of creative energy. I also have a background in events and team building. I worked when I was before I started hosting trivia. I actually had a side job working at a scavenger hunt company in New York
Okay.
City. There are such things as scavenger hunt companies, and I was
And that's a
writing.
similar vein.
It is, but I got a good feel for team building and getting people during the work hours or in a coworker situation, and doing some kind of fun shared activity. So I do have a background in that, and my background is actually in events, doing event programming, event planning, and such. So I said, I can bring all these skills that I have together, events programming, corporate team building, and now trivia. I can put it all together and create a new service offering of corporate trivia. There really was nothing like this back then. Just servicing companies, specifically in New York where I lived, and give them a fun, exciting activity that they would feel good about working at their companies. Companies would feel good about doing something for their employees. And so I created Trivworks. I just, came up with a cool name, a cool logo. I had a graphic designer put together a professional logo, put up a website, and I really wanted to make it look very slick and professional because I said, this is not going to be servicing bars. I'm not looking to have, expand to other bars. This is really something for corporate audiences. And what are corporate audiences going to be looking for? They're looking for professionalism. They're looking for competence. They're looking for credibility. And that's what
Yeah.
I focus on
And
creating.
I'll say this, you came up with this. I love your logo. So for those that are not familiar with Trivworks, the Trivworks logo, it says Trivworks Live Trivia Entertainment, but it's a human brain, and it has where you'd see all these little like synapses, but they're all little like trivia tidbits, like Lolita, Marvin the Martian. So it's like, because somewhere in your brain is all of this information that you're pulling out, right? And
I know, I know your listeners can't see it, but my favorite part of the Trivix logo is actually the microphone
oh
for the
yeah,
left.
the eye is a
Yeah.
microphone. Yeah.
Anyway, so I focused on trying to get corporate events and I started getting them. I started getting people coming up to me at the quiz nights that I was hosting and say, hey, can you do a corporate event? I started getting inquiries right through my website, which was very exciting. And I just started hosting trivia events for companies, for corporate groups, really anything I could. I said, I'm not going to turn down basically any gig at this point. I really need to build credibility. I was looking to gain client lists. I want some testimonials, any kind of press coverage I could get, anything that builds credibility. And that's really what I focused on. And I did that for about, another 2.5 years. Again, this is all as a side business. I was still working a full-time job at the time.
Sure.
I was still hosting my bar trivia nights, but I was really trying to build doing corporate events, and I would slowly, slowly build up my client list and getting bigger and bigger clients. They were all really happy. They all loved the experience. I would have a lot of repeat clients. Next thing I know, I'm starting to get big, prestigious law firms in New York City getting, bringing me in to do events for their summer associates or for their full-time associates or their partners. I started getting asked to do holiday party entertainment, on-site entertainment, and then even bigger companies, Fortune 500 companies started bringing me on board to do things. And I was able to take it full time at the very, very tail end of 2011. Just did the scariest thing I've ever done, which was, willingly give up my job as a security and stability of a full-time job to just focus on Trivworks full time. And that was over 13 years ago at this point, and I've been doing it nonstop ever since.
And so you said yourself you're not a trivia guy, but
Nope.
have you been the main content creator? Do you now have people that are
Yes.
working for you that are creating the content? And how do you come up with the content? And like you said, you customize sometimes for certain clients. So what's the process there?
Sure. So as far as customizing this, so first of all, every event I do is customized. I don't do any generic events of any kind. If so, client hires me, it's going to be a customized event. Now, there's different levels of customization, but it will be tailored. I never do an event that's generic. It really always feels tailored to that specific group as well as their goals. Two different ways I customize events. I can do a minimally customized event where I just send a basic customization questionnaire to the client in advance and get a sense demographically who's going to be their age range, nationality, that sort of thing. Things that they definitely want to have included, things that they don't want included, and then I can draw appropriate pop culture and general knowledge trivia from my database, which I'll get into just a second. I can also do a more fully customized event where we jump on a call, brief call, about 10 or so minutes is really all I need. And I've got my streamlined process for doing. I kind of start large and then go down to the more specifics and get to know who's going to be there, what they really want to, what can we do to tailor it. I don't want to make it a quiz of how well they know the company. I want to make it feel personalized. So what can I
Sure.
do that? Are there anything like past shared experiences, inside jokes, things that only this group would know? Because the last thing they'll expect is for the trivia person to come and be asking them questions about them. That's how you make things fun and personalized. Now, you
Uh,
had asked about my content creation. I still do most of it myself. I do work with other people to develop some trivia questions. If it's something very, very specialized that I really don't know about, I can hire a specialist to come in and write an entire Star Trek round or
sure.
Star Wars or something like that. But otherwise, I am developing the trivia questions. As I'm sure you've experienced yourself doing this for so long, and people you've had on this podcast too. There's a lot of repeat questions I can use if I know that
Of
this trivia
course.
or this round really works well for this age group or this audience or this industry. There's no reason you can't use it because it always goes so well. And very often I'll use the same trivia in the same order. Having this question at round one, and I'll end with this question at the very end of the trivia round. Trivia next. I know kind of the reaction that the client, the audience will have. But I still generally develop all the trivia by myself, and that does include customized questions that are researched and written specifically for individual clients.
Now, you do events coast to coast now. You're not just in New York anymore. You have events in LA, you have events all over the country. Are you then traveling around hosting all these, or do you have a team of hosts that you're setting out?
Sure. So about 9 years ago, I mentioned that the scariest thing I ever did was taking Trivworks full time. The second scariest thing I ever did was about 9 years ago. I moved from New York, where I'm from, to Southern California. I just up and moved with my family and set up shop on the West Coast. I really wanted to get things going on both coasts. Now, to do that, my client base was still based in New York. So I had to identify people that I could trust to do this. Now, that was very, very scary for me because I've been doing trivia and Trivworks myself. My brand basically was me. It's my company's called Trivworks. I didn't want to call it, David Jacobson, the world's greatest trivia host, hosted by David Jacobson, which I could have done, but I didn't want that. I really wanted to be something bigger. But in order to do that, I had to start trusting other people to do what I do, which was very, very scary for any entrepreneur. But I did find some people. I really found some people in New York who I trusted, who I felt could really do this. It's one of the first things I say to clients that, because I work with corporate audiences, I don't work with, local pub quiz hosts. I don't work with actors who I find on Craigslist. I really work with seasoned professional corporate MCs with years of experience specifically entertaining corporate audiences. And within them, I need to find people that have the chops to do this, to host trivia. It's more than just reading questions off a piece of paper. It's engaging the audience, it's reading the room, it's being spontaneous, it's having a personality, it's so many other different factors. And I was lucky enough to find people like that in New York who I could trust. So I started, doing everything I would normally do, prepping, selling, and prepping gigs. But instead of then physically showing up to the event in an office or a venue in Manhattan, I would send everything to one of my MCs in New York, have them go off and do it, and have it, always go well. But that was a tricky thing. That was hard for me to do. But I'm on the West Coast and I do events all up and down the coast where I am, and we also do events nationwide. I really design my events to be low maintenance. There's not a huge load in of equipment and that kind of thing. We really can just show up and with everything we need in a suitcase or a backpack and just run a really highly engaging event for any type of corporate crowd.
Nice. And so, with regards to the events that you run, are you a traditional pen and paper, or are people using devices to submit answers, or has that changed over time? As I know, a lot of
Yeah,
companies started out pen and paper, but now they're using an app or some sort of
yeah.
device to enter answers.
I still use pen and paper, primarily pen and paper. And that sounds crazy in 2025, but the reality is it works, it's fun. People like to have a little bit of a break. If you show up to one of my events, one of the, we pass out, answer packets. It's still professional. Every event I do, the answer packets are always branded with the client's logo. So
Nice.
it's nice and personalized. We've got, our special Trivworks branded pens. So that's always nice to see. But the first rule is you got to take your phone out and put it in the center of the table. We're going to liberate you from your digital device for the duration of this trivia event, and just go back to pen and paper. And people, it's weird at first, but then they feel relieved. They feel this is
Well, I'm an old fuddy duddy. I prefer that, so I'm
yeah,
glad you do that. Now, listen, I've had people on that use devices. I've played
sure.
games with devices, and they're plenty fun, and they can be done very well. But when it comes down to it, if you give me a choice, I want the pen and paper game.
Yeah, and there's a practical reason too, not just pen and paper, being old school. There's things you can do with pen and paper that you can't do with an app. If you have an app And it's you have a choice of three or four multiple choice questions. I mean, that's very limiting, and it's not as rewarding for an audience to select options A, B, C, or D versus trying to come up with the answer on their own.
Sure.
Free form answer. It's
Agreed.
reward.
Although people have made advances with apps now where you can do it that way too. But yeah.
It's
Yep.
it's 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 very rewarding for them to come up with the answer, but it's also an opportunity for funny points for putting submitting the funny wrong answers, which I'm
Yeah.
sure you do and others do, and that's something I encourage. And it's part of fostering that kind of environment that's festive and raucous and laugh filled is saying, look, you're not going to know every answer, but don't leave anything blank. Write down something funny. And we'll read out the funny wrong answers. Is a great way to get laughs. There's so many different opportunities to get laughs throughout these events, and that's one of them. And I really want to embrace that. So I encourage funny wrong answers, and you can't do that if you've got a multiple choice only.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree. And I always like to, when I'm running events, I always like to not only see like how many people got something wrong, how many people got something right, but who got it
Mm,
wrong, but put down something that is either a great wrong answer, which means
yeah.
it probably was really close to being right, but was wrong, or it's just kind of a hysterical answer that, and my favorite one of those ever was I asked what colorful film memorably beat out Citizen Kane to win the Best Picture award. And the person that wrote down the answer was not the person on the team that knew the answer. So the person on the team that knew it told that person, and there was like kind of a game of telephone where they misheard. And instead of writing down "How green is my valley," they wrote down "Al Green is a valley." And I was like, all right, I think I know what happened here, but we're gonna have to get to the bottom of it. And you don't get those moments if you're just asking multiple choice questions. So I
That's
think that's
true. And
great.
and those for intentionally funny wrong answers. Now, occasionally I'll get unintentionally funny wrong answers, and one that I still hold on to, I still love. It shows people's ages or that they're not quite old enough, or their eavesdropping skills are not so good. I had a musical trivia round for one event, and the answer was a Hall and Oates question, Hall and Oates song. And when I was grading and looking at the answer sheets, the answer said Holland Oates.
Yeah, so close.
And I tweeted it out and I said, this is an actual answer submitted at one of our trivia events with a hashtag trivia fail. And I tagged the band Hall and Oates and they, they retweeted it to their followers. It was great.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, what's the largest event you've ever done?
Largest event I've ever done. I did a 1,400 person trivia event in Las Vegas. And in paper, 1,400 people. Pretty ambitious, but I did it.
Now, when you have a pen and paper game and you have 1,400 people, you can't do that yourself, right? How many people are you bringing with you to help score, grade? Like, what's the
Sure. So
staffing like for something like that?
So for any event that I do, virtually any event, I'll send at least two people. I'll send a professional MC, whether it's myself or one of my colleagues who I work with, and I'll usually bring a production assistant. And that person's job is just to help facilitate the event, doing things like grading and setup and whatnot. So any event I do, whether it's 50 people or 1,400 people, I try to send at least one additional staff person. Now that particular one, 1,400 people, that's way larger than I'd done previously. I have a lot of experience doing events in the 2 to 300 person range, and I really got that down working with groups of that size. But with 1,400 people, I was kind of trying to figuring it out myself. How are we going to make this work? I was able to get a squad of people together. I don't know if it was 5, 6, 8 people. We just did one team trivia round for everybody, and we kind of did it slowly, and we did it in a different format that I normally would. But we didn't set the expectation this is going to be a full trivia night. We said we're just going to have some
Sure.
fun. So setting the expectation was important. Having some interstitial entertainment in between the round while we do that grading was important, and I can get into the format that I do and the interstitial games I do in a little bit with you. But I knew that was going to be important to keep the crowd engaged because I knew it was going to take some time. The reality, though, is that it doesn't matter how many people you've got in the room, it's how many teams you have. And
Yeah,
if you've got 1,400 people and you've got, say 10 people at a table, that's, 140 teams, which is a lot. But when I do events for 300 people, I've had upwards of 50, 60 teams. So that was really just double that amount of time. And it actually went pretty quickly. We had people go throughout this whole room. It's a gigantic ballroom at a hotel, the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. And we just had people stationed throughout the entire ballroom and just collected it. We zoned each area of the ballroom. They collected the entries, went to a separate conference room adjacent to the ballroom, quickly banged out the trivia scoring. And what we did was we said, let's anyone who got 10 out of 10, let's put their name into a raffle bowl. And we just had a whole bunch of team names in a raffle bowl. And then up on stage, we did a drawing and declared the overall winner that way. So that's how we did the 1,400 person event. Is that the best way to do it? Probably not. Especially this day and age when there's technology. That's a case where I would prefer to use technology in an app or something versus,
Sure.
but I mentioned earlier that, I had a lot of experience doing 300 person events. And, I developed that because back in 2011 or so, I was still working full-time job in bar trivia, but getting Trivworks off the ground. I started the biggest trivia nights in New York City at the time, 300 or so people at a place called the Bell House, big performance venue in Brooklyn. I was very fortunate right when I started Trivworks to have gotten in touch with a guy named Pat Kiernan. Pat Kiernan, extremely well-known media personality in New York City. He's the morning news anchor on New York One, which is the main news station in New York. Again, very recognizable, very well-known, but also a game show host. Pat Kiernan was the host of VH1's The World Series of Pop Culture for 2 seasons. And he discovered Trivworks through Twitter and he contacted me and he and I got in touch to do corporate events, really. But I realized that there was an opportunity also to do events with Pat, public events. And we established a trivia event series in Brooklyn with Pat Kiernan as a celebrity MC. And that drew upwards of 300 people every time we do these events. So I'm happy to talk more about that if you'd like, but that's really where I got the confidence to do larger scale events of that
Okay.
experience to do
Well,
like I do a 1,400 person event.
yeah, no, so you mentioned Pat Kiernan, and Pat Kiernan, I have heard of him, and of course, I was a big fan of the World Series of Pop Culture, but I would say he's not even the biggest name, at least in the trivia sphere, that you work with, because you have a partnership or some sort of working arrangement with a guy named Scott Rogowski, who trivia people will recognize that name as he was the Scott Daddy of Trivia HQ, which a few years back, about 7 years ago, took the world by storm. And I knew a bunch of people that I won a little bit of money on it, but I knew a bunch of people that did pretty well and won upwards of thousands of dollars on that app. And he was the main host. And of course, I know he's a big baseball fan. He left Trivia HQ to do a baseball gig. And so, what is your relationship with Scott Rogowski? And is it similar to the relationship you had with Pat or have with Pat? And how did
Sure.
that come?
Sure. So I'm always looking for new experiences and new offerings for my corporate clients. I've got partnerships with other celebrity talent, special talent MCs, celebrity comedians and media personalities. I work with an illusionist. Other people can, engage an audience in a different way. And in thinking about, who would be exciting, who would be, someone that's got the experience to do this with some name recognition, who I would trust in front of a corporate audience. And, Scott Rogowski is just a name that's been, always in the back of my mind for someone who I think would be really, obviously, very good at this with a lot of unique experience, but also be very exciting to my corporate clients. So he and I connected, relatively recently, and just kind of shared the idea of, working together to do these types of events. And we said, let's just, let's make it happen. Let's put something out and put it up. And it's a very new partnership with Scott, but I'm very, very excited about it. As you mentioned, he's very well known in the trivia world. He's really, really well known in the comedy world as well. He's a professional stand-up comedian. But I mentioned earlier that I really like to work with people. I only like to work with people who've got the professional chops to do this at a high level in front of a corporate audience and who I would trust to do that. And Scott is definitely one of those people. So I'm really excited about the partnership with Scott Rogowski from HQ Trivia, the quiz daddy, and looking forward to seeing what we can do together.
Now, boy, I got to tell you, now I want to host some Trivworks events. We're gonna have to talk about that another time, but I want to see if I have those chops. I think I might. We'll see. So tell me a little bit about a Trivworks game. What is
Yeah.
the standard format, or what is the? I mean, I'm sure you adapt as you need to
Yep.
for particular clients.
Yep.
But if you're going to give the standard classic
Yep.
Trivworks game, How many
Yeah.
rounds is it? How many questions? Is there a final wager or anything like that?
Yep, sure. So my events, they're pretty standard format, and I could do my events on site at a client's office, whether that's a multi-purpose room or a conference room or a cafeteria, or at an off-site venue like a hotel space, private room in a bar, or restaurant, private residence. Depends on what they're looking for. We'll arrive with everything we need. I mentioned I bring staff, usually at least two people. If it's a smaller event and the venue does not have audio projection, we can bring our own audio projection equipment. That's something we often do. This kind of standard event that I offer my clients, usually it's an evening activity. I've done plenty of morning events, a lot of afternoon activities, but usually it's in the evening, after hours, happy hour feel. We'll arrive, get all set up. It's very, very quick to get all set up and sound checks and whatnot. But the typical experience is I do three different types of trivia. The first is what I call roving trivia entertainment. And that's when the client is arriving, the group is coming into the space, they're getting settled, they're socializing, maybe they're grabbing some food and drink. What happens then is my MC and any other support staff that I bring is going to do some informal roving trivia. Just very casual, very informal, going up to small groups of people, kind of working the space, asking some fun trivia questions that are really designed to be answered collaboratively. Again, very informal, very casual. It's a warm-up activity. Depending on what the client's looking for, we could even give away things like small prizes or raffle tickets to be used later. But it's a fun kind of way to ease in to the trivia event. That's
And they're
usually a
not doing this on a mic then. They're just going up
nope.
doing it face to
It's
face.
it's very it's very much like you might see a strolling close-up of magician, but we do that with trivia, just going right up to small groups of people,
I love it.
introducing ourselves, asking some questions, whether they know each other or not. They're shooting ideas around, and I've got some examples to show you. What then happens typically is that people are seated. If there's going to be a meal, whether it's a plated meal or a buffet, let them have some
Sure.
food. Any kind of remarks that the CEO wants to give or anything, let that happen. And then we'll start the team trivia competition. I mentioned we do client branded answer packets and pens. Those are all passed out to all the different tables. The MC gets on the microphone, very brief orientation, and then we dive right in. Now, the way we do it is very funny. I've kept the same format that I started doing almost 20 years ago at the Irish Pub in New York when it comes to team trivia. I do multiple rounds of team trivia, 10 questions per round, and each round has a specific theme. And the reason I do that is because it works. There's no reason to change it. It worked then
Sure.
and it works now. The theme of the round usually is whatever the client likes. If they want to do something specific to them or to the audience, if it's a fun theme that they want to do, a celebratory month or holiday or some other kind of fun theme, terrific. Otherwise, I like to keep the themes well-rounded and broad. I really want these events to feel approachable and engaging for everybody there. I don't care if they're young or old, if they just started working at the company, they've been there for 20 years. I really want to make sure everyone feels like they're having fun and participating and that the questions are relevant and appropriate. So I try to keep the round themes broad. Things like general knowledge, a little history, science, that sort of thing. I like to do some pop culture, a broad theme pop culture trivia round, some TV and movie, current events, celebrity news, what have you. I'm sure you know this, but all different types of groups love Name That Tune. So I do a
Sure.
10 question tune round, point for the artist, point for the song title. I typically do a photo ID round. And that's where, they have to identify celebrity pictures for a point each. And then if they get all 10 celebrities will share something in common. If they can figure out that connection, they'll get a 5-point bonus. I like to end on what we call the bonus round. The questions are a little harder, but they're worth 2 points each. If the space has screens available, I love to put together a custom slide deck and have some fun visual clues accompanying this. Is not required. I mentioned earlier that I really try to make my events not very high maintenance. So if a venue or a client just doesn't have the capability to do visuals, that's perfectly fine. But if there is, love to put it together to make it more interactive. There is a third type of trivia that I do at my trivia events. So whether it's 1,400 person event or a 15-person event, we have to collect the answer sheets and grade them. It takes a couple minutes to do that, and I want to make sure that in between the rounds of trivia, that the client continues to be engaged and entertained. I don't want any dead air. I don't want any downtime. I want to make it a seamless engagement and entertainment experience. So several ways we've learned to do that over the years. Most commonly, what I'll do is we'll have two people come up in front of the entire room, and the MC will moderate a little one-on-one head-to-head trivia bout in front of everybody. Now that's a total blast. That does have a little bit of a game show feel. Give away little prizes, keep the laughs coming. It's not meant to be, high pressure or high stakes. It's just meant to be fun and fill that time we need. But I use that as a great opportunity to have some fun with two people at a time up on stage. I also have some other interstitial games that I like to do in between the rounds of trivia. We have a whole bunch of minute to win it style party games, very kind of low impact, semi physical games and challenges we can do for small groups or entire teams. Have some fun with them. We can do karaoke in between rounds of trivia. Last year, I developed what I call Trivworks Escape, which is an escape room style activity where in between the rounds while we're grading, all the tables have been preset with some props and lock boxes and stuff, and they have to, kind of figure out the clues, and that's the way to engage them in between the rounds. But no matter what it is, the idea is to keep the crowd engaged, having a fun time while giving us just a couple minutes to do the grading. And then we read out the answers and standings and go on to the next round. As far as culminating the event, usually it's just a big, dramatic reveal at the very end of the night, announcing the final scores, standings from lowest to highest, and a big reveal of the winner. We can also do what we call a showdown style finale, and this is something that was developed with Pat Kiernan. He likes to do these for his events, where we take the top two teams and we take one team, put them on stage. The other team we'll bring to a nearby isolation room, and then we'll have the MC ask the people on stage 15 questions, lightning style, very, very quickly. As many right as they can get, they get a point each. We then bring the second team in up on stage, ask them the same questions, and whichever team got the most points.
Oh, that is fun. That is
Yeah.
definitely a game show element to the game.
Yep.
And I always like those, especially for corporate events. I think they
Yeah.
add a real big element of fun.
Yeah, and we also have some tiebreakers if need be. I always have a tiebreaker or two that's tailored for that audience. I hate tiebreakers. It stretches the event out. It opens the door for people contesting and not being happy when I want everyone to be happy. But I do have some great tiebreakers. Usually it's like a Price is Right style. Here's a question, the answer is a number. No one's going to get the actual number, but whichever team gets closest wins. And then if need be, we can do things like a
Uh,
dance.
all right. Well, do you have some questions handy? Do you have kind of a mock game that we can run through and we can see how I would do it at a Trivworks event? I
I
mean,
totally.
granted, nobody's playing against me, so I'm going to win. So that's good.
So let's see. You've arrived to our Trivix event. You are at the cocktail hour. A very good-looking trivia guy comes up to you and introduces himself and wants to ask if you guys want to do some trivia before the event. The questions that we ask during the roving are really designed to be answered collaboratively. And you'll get some of the answers right away, but then you have to shoot around ideas, try to figure them out. Here's a good example for you, Jeremy. I might say, which of the 10 parts of the body that have only three letters in their name? Now, no slang, no swears. 10 parts of the body that have only three letters in their names.
All right. So we got the lip, we
Lip,
got the arm, we got
arm,
the eye, we
eye,
got the ear, we got
ear,
the hip,
hip,
we got the toe.
toe,
Two, three, four, five, six. So I'm looking for four more. A rib
rib. You're
is
doing better
seven.
than
Okay.
we're stuck in the last three, and this is where we're shooting ideas around and
Yeah,
giving.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I know they're in there somewhere. I know there's going to be somebody listening, and it's going to be like, "Why didn't you say this yet?" Let's see. D is four letters. I already said. Ear, I already said. Oh, your gum.
Wow, you're doing way better than most. People usually get
Uh,
stuck.
okay. So I've got eight right now. I need two
Yep.
more. Your pinky, your heart, your vein, your artery, capillary. Yeah. No, I got to think more generic. More generic is what I got to think. Okay. I got my chin. I got people can't see this, but I'm like touching parts of my body, my nose, my eyebrow, my
And
uh,
usually at this point, I'm kind of directing them to, it's within this range, from,
yeah, like where
from
on
the,
your body,
from the,
shoulder,
I can
your
give you some hints if
elbow,
you
your
like.
knee, your
You
oh
did
my
really,
God,
really
why can I
well.
not think of the this is it, give me like 10 more seconds and then I'm gonna ask you for a hint here.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I gotta I gotta think of these. What have I not said? Oh, I have not said your leg, have I? I haven't said
Say
leg.
leg?
Yeah,
You say
I didn't
you
say leg and I didn't say jaw.
you didn't say jaw, and most people don't get jaw.
Okay.
Impressive.
Uh, yeah. All right. So there you go. Yeah,
There you go.
jaw's a
See,
tough one, I think, because you think mouth, you think,
yeah,
and you don't automatically just refer
yeah.
to it as your jaw, even though it is. So, all
Now that was
right.
something you did, right? That was something you did on your own. Now imagine if you're, with a group of three, four, five, six people doing this. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of
Oh,
laughter.
yeah.
It's a lot of wait, you already said toe, no, okay, you said that already. Oh man, give us a hint. And then by the time I leave, they're still laughing and having a lot of fun, even though they didn't know each other beforehand. So that
Now, I
usually
know
works.
you said no slang, but when somebody throws out like ass, you're like, well.
I say, hey, I said no slang or swears. And I had to
Yeah.
develop that rule years ago because people were saying it.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a good example of roving. I've got a whole bunch of roving style trivia questions like that, designed to be answered collaboratively. They're a lot of
Sure.
fun. Now, as far as
Questions are great for that, I think.
yeah, sure.
Like
Now,
Tom. Hanks movies or Pixar movies or.
mhm. Again, knowing the audience and just being make sure it's relevant and appropriate to them. They love the roving. Now, as far as team trivia goes, my format there, again, I don't know what you typically do or what other people on this podcast typically do. I want to go quickly. I don't want a long time in between each round. Some people do that. Some bar quiz, hosts like to have a big extended period of time in between each question. I really don't like to do that. I like to keep the event moving. I like to keep the energy high. I usually have about 10 or 15 seconds in between each question. I'll always read each question twice, and then
Okay.
I'll repeat it if need be, but I really do try to go quickly. And I encourage funny wrong answers, as I mentioned. But I do want the questions, I don't want them to be too hard. I don't want them to be too easy, but I don't want them to be too hard. I know, there's a tendency among us, trivia people, we want to show how creative and clever we are, coming up with really creative and clever trivia questions. My job, though, as a corporate entertainment and producer, I want that room to have a blast, and people have a
Yeah.
blast when they get the questions correct. So I really want most of the people to get the questions correct. I don't want them to think about how clever I am for coming up with these questions. So a lot of the questions I ask are challenging, but you're probably going to get most of them, which is by
Well,
design.
yeah, that's fine. I play a lot of trivia, so I would hope I would do well.
Here's a good example of a nice general knowledge question. I might ask something like, lacking any political power, what is the only country in the world today with a head of state using the title of emperor?
Head of state using the title of emperor. I mean, I think there's still an emperor of Japan, isn't there?
It is. There is an emperor of
Okay.
Japan.
Yeah.
Awesome. I always want to ask questions, at least one question that's very local to whatever that group is. Wherever they are, I really want to make it feel personalized, not generic. Many of my clients are based in New York, so I like to have at least one New York question, and I usually ask something like this, which even though you're not from New York, you might be able to know this. I might say, what is the smallest of New York City's five boroughs by area?
Okay. I know that it is not. I just actually had a question that asked what was the largest, and I believe that was Queens,
Yes.
if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And I believe Manhattan is the
Yep.
smallest.
Very good. Pop culture questions. I always want to have good pop culture questions. Trivworks, I really focus on mostly pop culture, but I don't want to make it, irrelevant to the audience. If it's a really, young crowd, they love pop culture, terrific. But if it's an older crowd, they might not know it or not like it so much. If it's a mixed international crowd, I really can't have a lot of American-centric pop culture. So if I do pop culture, I try to be careful about how I do it. I want to make sure it's relevant to all ages and nationalities and whoever's in that space. But a typical question I might ask in the pop culture might be something like this: what is Pantone's 2025 color of the year? It's a multiple choice. So I do have multiple choice questions. Pantone's 2025 color of the year, and this is something I would display on the screen behind me. Is it A, raspberry vitality? Is it B, lavender virility? Is it C, mocha mousse? Or D, orange Julius? A, B, C, or D?
Okay, I'm eliminating Orange Julius right away. I just think that would have been the color of the year 20 years ago when Orange Julius was more of a thing. You said raspberry what? Mocha mousse
Raspberry
and
vitality, lavender virility, or mocha mousse?
okay, I'm getting rid of raspberry. Lavender vitality. I think has a chance because Taylor had her song Lavender
Mhm.
Haze,
Yeah.
but Mocha Moose, I like the alliteration better, so I'm gonna go with Mocha Moose.
You're right. You got it. Very, very cool. But things like the Orange Julius, that's another, I always look for opportunities to make the crowd laugh, make them feel nostalgic, have fun with it. That's a great way to do it. Just throw in a clunker in the multiple choice.
Yeah.
It makes it less dry. People laugh with it. And the younger people who don't know what Orange Julius is, they're like, what's Orange Julius? The older people like us are like, you don't know that? Go watch Stranger Things and learn something. Here's another one. How about this? During a recent live broadcast of the SNL 50 celebration, which 25-year-old pop star helped kick off the show by singing a duet with 83-year-old Paul Simon?
Oh no, I watched this and she's such an amazing. Was it Miley Cyrus?
Oh, Miley Cyrus is incorrect,
Oh,
but you're on the right track. Younger than Miley Cyrus.
oh, that's right. Yeah, Miley Cyrus isn't.
Very hot right now.
Yeah. Oh, wait, it wasn't Chapel Roan.
Was it? Same vein.
Did you just say it? Don't say
Nope,
it.
I'm not saying it.
Oh, Sabrina Carpenter. Sabrina
Daily
Carpenter.
Carpenter. There you go. See, I like that kind of question because it's on the tip of your tongue. You know it. You
Yeah.
know it. You can't remember, but you know it. It's
I
not
because
something
I
you have
watched it and I
no
remember
idea.
thinking, wow,
Right.
I know who Sabrina Carpenter is and I know she's
Yeah.
got a decent voice, but I
Yeah.
remember thinking, wow, she was amazing in
Yeah.
that special. She really did a
Yeah.
great job.
Now, sports trivia questions. Sports is something I've learned over the years that you got to be careful with sports. With
Yes,
sports, people either know it or they
that's
don't. There's
me. Yeah,
really no in between.
yeah,
And I'm one of the people that doesn't know it. I'm famous for my friends, and everyone knows me that I just don't know sports, and they make fun of me for it. But I own a trivia company, so I have to ask sports questions. So then,
sure.
what kind of sports questions do I ask? I have to ask questions that are fun and relevant, but that are also going to be, people are going to actually have a chance of getting. So here's a typical. I've got two examples of sports questions that you might hear at a Trivworks event. What are the names of the small divots on golf balls?
There's just dimples.
They're dimples. And what's fun
Okay.
about that is that dimples is a fun name. It's a
Yeah,
fun word. And so when I ask that kind of question, I might put up a picture when I reveal the answer of a celebrity with big bright dimples like Harry Styles or something. It's another
sure.
opportunity for. Here's another question. I don't want to ask too many statistics and stuff, but I want to ask things that people might know the answers to. But here's one that I've used this question for a long time. I use it as one of my culminating questions because of the crowd response is so great. I almost always ask it. Which are the only two teams of the original NBA still playing in their original host cities? No partial credit. You got to name them both. The only two teams of the original NBA still playing in their original host cities.
Well, I'm fairly certain the New York Knicks were an original NBA team, and they are still obviously the New York Knicks. Now, the Philadelphia 76ers were originally the Syracuse Nationals. The Los Angeles Lakers were originally the Minneapolis Lakers. The
Mhm.
Sacramento Kings were originally the Rochester Royals. The Detroit Pistons were originally the Fort Wayne Pistons. So who am I forgetting? The Boston Celtics are originally the Boston Celtics. Duh. New York Knicks and the Boston Celtics.
Yes. So that's one of those questions that you can figure out if you don't already know it. And it's a great audience response. And I always ask
Yes,
this question the same way, and I always reveal the answer the same way. I say we've got the Boston Celtics, and then there's always a big and because they got that one, they want to know what the next
sure.
one is. And then particularly if I'm in New York, we reveal and the New York Knicks, and the crowd always goes crazy.
Now,
It's very
do you ever have fun and go? And then you have the Los Angeles Lakers, who are incorrect because they started in Minneapolis, which is why they're called the Lakers. And so people get excited when you say and the Los Angeles Lakers, and then you're like, but you're wrong.
what I like to do in those situations, if I feel the crowd, if I feel the energy is going to be something that will respond well to that, I might throw in a wrong answer that I've seen. I might say, the New Jersey Nets, and everyone, one team in the back will start screaming, and I'll say, is incorrect, and
Yeah,
then have that kind of like dramatic pause is really really
sure.
good. I mentioned I do one other type of trivia on stage. I do some interstitial games, some one-on-one trivia in between the rounds while we're trying to fill that time during the grading. I'll usually ask for volunteers based on the category, or maybe we'll have pre-selected some senior staff or executives to have some fun with up on stage. But I'll get two people up on stage, do a brief little banter with each of them, set the tone. This is going to be fun and very, low key. Just have a little brief interview with them up on stage, and then we dive in. And the way I do these one-on-one games, again, these were developed by Pat Kiernan. I'm going to give Pat a lot of credit for doing this, creating these questions. I think they are somewhat in the style of the World Series of Pop Culture Trivia, but I still use them today. The idea here is the MC has six trivia questions in his or her hand, and is going to alternate between the two contestants. If the contestant A gets a question right, they'll get a point. If they get it incorrect or don't know the answer, the other contestant B, can steal. Now, the first person to get 3 points is going to be declared the winner. And of course, everyone gets prizes, but that's how we break it down. So I do have six questions here in my hand. The categories, I do try to make them tailored to what I think that audience is going to respond well to. Usually I'll show up, or have my MC show up with a nice stack of these one-on-one games that I've developed over the years, and kind of just feel it out and see which of these rounds the crowd will respond well to. You've really impressed me, Jeremy, with your pop culture knowledge. So I've got a round here of celebrities in the news.
Okay.
Celebrities, and I'm just going to ask you, here's question number one. Which song did Ryan Gosling perform at last year's Oscars?
I'm just Ken.
I'm just Ken from Barbie. Very good. You got yourself a point. Ken, you have one. Now we're going to go over to, I'm sorry, Jeremy, you have one. And now we're going to go over to Jeremy. Two, she went viral late last year. What type of adorable animal is Moo Dang, a baby creature from Thailand?
Pygmy hippo, I believe.
Pygmy hippo is correct. Here's a question number three. Which actor made headlines this past fall by making a surprise appearance at his own look-alike contest in New York City's Washington Square Park?
Timothy Chalamet.
Timothy Chalamet, absolutely correct. Here's question number four of our Celebrities in the News round. At this past year's Golden Globes Awards, host Nikki Glazer enlisted Adam Sandler to poke fun at saying which actor's name.
Yeah.
It's also Timothy Chalamet. And you can see, that's kind of the way I like to engage the crowd. It makes people laugh. It makes people happy and smile to have repeats like that. Question number five, which top-selling singer canceled her 2024 concerts when she revealed she suffers from an ailment called stiff person syndrome?
Oh, stiff person's 2024, you said.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that Celine Dion suffers from that, but I didn't think that was 2024. So I'm going to say Celine Dion, but I don't think that's right.
But it is right. So you got
Oh,
yourself a well done.
okay.
And finally, which Bronx-born singer's Las Vegas residency is at risk following canceled tour dates and poor sales of her new This Is Me Now album?
Well, I know that Katy Perry had a very poorly received recent. Oh, no. That's not the name of her. It's J-Lo. It's Jennifer Lopez, right?
That's correct. There you go. Wonderful. So you see, these are the type of questions I like to ask. They're not too difficult, they're not too brainy, they're not too easy, but I am looking for that sweet spot where tip of your tongue, you know the answer. Hopefully it's fun type of stuff that you're not dealing with in your work day in and day out. I don't ask law questions to lawyers. I don't want to ask questions about derivatives to finance types. I really want this to be a fun way for people to unwind, but also to connect because you might not know people very well or at all, but you've got shared experiences through things like pop culture. And I've really been able to tap into that over the years with Trivworks, and it really goes over so well. So I'm just really thrilled to be able to do questions like this for different types of audiences all over the country.
Well, you know what? If you ever get an audience in Chicago or really anywhere, but I mean, if you have one in Chicago, which is where I'm currently residing,
Yep.
I would love to come out and experience it. I mean, I'll work it, I'll help you out, do what I can, but I'd love to see a Trivworks
Well,
game in action because it
I
sounds phenomenal.
if you want to, I will be at the SporkleCon this coming.
Oh,
I'll be at
that's great.
SporkleCon. Yep, I got invited to be at SporkleCon. I'm participating in two programs there. I'm going to be on a panel
Okay.
discussion called "The Business of Trivia" with some other
Okay.
panel. How to, anything related to the trivia business. There's going to be a lot of
Well,
stuff
that's
that's going on
fantastic.
about trivia and competition, but this is going to be specifically about, things like things like pub quiz and how do you set that up and how do you market it.
Sure.
I'm going to talk a bit about corporate events and my experience working in corporate events and trivia. It's very niche. There's not too many people that do what I do, and I'm happy to share that knowledge with people. Later in the day, I'm also going to be leading what we are calling a break, a Trivworks networking and social break from all the high stress, high stakes trivia.
Sure.
We're going to have a Trivworks social networking break, and that's where I'll be leading a fun event using questions just like this to get people laughing and talking with one another, hopefully creating some really memorable moments and conversational moments for people to have throughout the rest of SpokeCon and hopefully beyond. So if you're going to be there, I'd love to meet you and you can kind
I
of experience
will
what I do firsthand.
certainly, be there for at least part of it, if not all of it. I know Jay Borsum, who was just on an episode recently, is also going to be on that same panel, and Jay was just on Jeopardy. And as we're recording this, tomorrow is going to be attempting to set a Guinness World Record for the longest Quizmaster session.
Along with
36 hours Jay is trying to ask trivia questions for
oh,
consecutively.
God bless Jay. That
Yeah,
sounds horrible, but good luck.
daunting. Yeah, very daunting. I'm gonna go for as much of it as I can. Try and be a player, a participant in that, and support Jay in any way that I can. But thank you, David, for coming on. I guess
Sure.
to close it out, is there anybody you would like to shout out or anything you'd like to say? And then we'll just wish people well.
Oh no, I appreciate you having me on here, Jeremy. This is really, really exciting. I'm thrilled that you created this podcast. It's been really wonderful to listen to some of the other podcasts that you've already released, and I'm encouraging anyone who's listening to this now to go back and listen to some of the other podcasts that you've recorded with other great trivia professionals. I'm
Sure.
looking forward to seeing other kinds of interviews you have here, and looking forward to meeting you and others at the SprokelCon this coming August.
That'll be great. I'm looking forward to meeting you in August, David. Thank you for coming on. For those listening, thank you for listening and happy quizzing. And remember, we now have not just the Monday full length episodes, but every Tuesday through Friday, what I call the QIA quick quiz, where I do a round of trivia so you can get a little trivia fix on a daily basis. And that's all.